Okay, check. Just testing for latency here. I'm going to be turning off the... yeah, I'm just going to turn this down. Check. I'm waiting to see when this comes out. Come on. There we go. So, not sure who's on the stream. I'm trying... Okay, sorry. So this is episode number 24, I think, dropping in the pipeline audio. I'm actually went and bought Restream, so I'm able to broadcast from the pipeline audio page, and I'm testing out this chat relay thing that seems pretty handy. And you can see we got a bunch of crazy lights. Video over here. So I'm just going to switch. And allegedly, I can see you guys type in the chat. We'll see how that works. So YouTube, Facebook, whatever you guys are watching on, I should be able to see you in real time. And I should be able to talk back to each source, whatever, from here. So supposed to have, hoping to get Jim Roseberry on again, but I didn't. So I've just hit some core questions that were piling up on me. So I'll just get right into them until I see something for whoever's talking to me. Actually, let me just test this chat. Okay, that's going good. So, okay. So, let's just go to the first one. How close can you get to a big studio sound with just using GarageBand? Digital audio is digital audio. Unless they're breaking something, it shouldn't matter which DAW you're using. I don't like GarageBand because it's really hard to export stuff out of it. I had some trouble trying to get MIDI out of it. But if you're just staying in GarageBand, and I think it has like plugins, like audio units plugins or something, and even if it didn't, it's probably fine. It's more about what you're putting into it and what you're doing with it than what the DAWs are doing. I know there's all these religious wars over how different DAWs sound different, but every time we test them, for the most part, they're going to sound exactly the same, given the same inputs and given the same parameters. So, if you want to use GarageBand, go ahead and use GarageBand. You shouldn't have any. You're going to have trouble sharing stuff with people and collaborating with people, but in terms of So this, these are the kind of things that I'm constantly testing, right? So may as well. How can I record a song from home without expensive equipment, and what's the basic things I'll need? It depends what you're trying to record and what you consider expensive. Do you have to record a drum set? Do you need super quiet backgrounds? Because that's where your big trouble with doing things at home is it's not so much the gear, it's the acoustic environment. You're probably going to be in small rooms with 8-foot ceilings that are just super tubby sounding, and it's probably not going to be good isolation between you and your neighbors. So you're probably going to want to play quieter or sing quieter than you really need to, so that you don't bother them. And then all the cars going by and the neighbor's lawnmower or whatever is probably going to make some trouble. If you live out in the middle of nowhere with 5 acres between you and your next door neighbor, you're probably fine. Make as much noise as you want. You're probably still going to have some acoustic issues with the rooms you're using, but that's still a big deal. But if you're just singing or just playing acoustic, Of course, we've heard great stuff come out of people's bedrooms. Um, for the for drum sets, you're talking you're going to need a little bit more space. When it comes to the equipment, even the cheapest microphones are pretty good right now. I know again that's blasphemy, but they really are. There's some pretty good microphones out there. Again, it's more about what your room's going to do to the microphone that's going to matter that much. In terms of the actual recording interfaces, in case you haven't been following around with my testing, very cheap audio interfaces sound very, very good. I know people, again, I'm just going to say, take it with a grain of salt when these people, or even when I say it. But, I've done tests, and even the cheapest stuff is pretty much ruler flat and low noise, low distortion. It's just good stuff. Your latencies can be pretty low. I'm going to turn off all the background audio now. Sorry. Best interface in the world is going to be pretty close to the some of the cheaper interfaces. As long as you're going with something good, the Behringer stuff turns out works pretty good. The Focusrite stuff is great. The Motu stuff is awesome. So for $500, okay. So you know what? I just did the tests on the Behringer XR18, which is 16 channels of mic preamps that sound pretty good. You can go look on pipelineaudio.net and look at the test results. It versus some really expensive stuff. You get 16 really good mic preamps. They're not the $5,000 a piece mic preamps, but they're good. And you also get an audio interface. Again, it's not the lowest latency audio interface out there, but it's low enough. I was just using the USB driver on my Midas M32 for the longest time, and that's pretty much the same driver. And I was recording whole bands with it. So you might have some latency purists. We actually had an episode about latency purists and dealing with them. But if you're not one of those guys and you don't have to deal with them, you're probably going to be fine. If you do have to deal with them, there's probably going to be a way that you can do it. So, $500, you got 16 channels. If you don't need that many channels, just go buy one of those Scarlett 2i2s, one of those cheap Focusrites, or the new PreSonuses. They're all good. The Behringer ones are good. There could be better. Some of the latencies are mostly what you're caring about at this point is whether you're going to get dropouts and how low of latency can you go. You want the lowest latency, get Motu or RME. That seems to still be the wisdom 20 years later. It's a two-horse game. I know people are saying that the audience and some of those UADs and stuff are that good now, but if you really want tried and true and trusted, I'd go for the Motus and RMEs. And they're not that much more money either than the other interfaces. So, it's up to you. The basic things you'll need: some headphones, maybe some cheap monitor speakers, a computer, an audio interface, and a couple microphones. However many microphones you're going to need for what you're doing. It's not that much. You can probably, on Craigslist, you can get by on under $500. If you're just going to order straight off of Sweetwater, I'd say, $1,000 or less. You're gonna have a killer studio, stuff we would have dreamed of back in the day. So let me get past that one. So here comes one more near and dear to my heart. So he asks, what's the point of recording in stereo when the two mics are placed at the same point, like within 1 centimeter of each other, the way handheld recorders are designed? Won't the two channels sound identical, thus basically adding up to mono? They could. If you had two Omni mics and they were right next to each other, they probably would. But assuming you're using, let's just start from cardioid. Let's say you're using a coincident pair, two cardioid mics right next to each other but pointing in different directions. We do that all the time for the overheads on a drum set, right? So you're gonna, it's gonna, they have different pickup patterns. So they're gonna have a not just a pickup pattern, but you're gonna have a tremendous effect on how loud a source is that reaches one mic versus the other. In some miking situations, you're actually seeing which one is closer than the other, and that's kind of what you get stereo out of. But with a coincident pair of cardioids, you are you're actually pointing at two totally different things. And then, depending on how you're pointed, that's how loud that source is going to be in one microphone versus the other. So you'd be surprised. Go ahead and try it. You're going to get a very big stereo image. And then let's move on to, let's say you had two in figure eight and they're pointed 90 degrees against each other. Now you got a Blumline pair. And again, you've got a very different signal getting into each mic. And then the one I used to always use for drum overheads and for acoustic guitar recording was the mid-side pattern. So you have one mic pointing right at your source in cardioid, and then you have another one 90 degrees off in figure eight. And so then you got that's a mid-side or MS or some indifference, and that's a really popular stereo pattern. So that's two mics right next to each other doing it. So there you go. What is the best portable setup for making music? For making, I don't know. Bring your instruments, whatever you got to do to make them. But currently a good portable setup for recording music, I would say that again, that Behringer XR18 and a laptop. That's a pile of inputs, and it'd be hard to get a laptop that was so slow that you couldn't record that many inputs onto today. So that and whatever mics you're going to need, and a whole bunch of cables to plug in whatever you need to plug in. Some DIs. It turned out that the old Rapco DB100 DI box, it's like a $40 DI. It seemed to have tested better than any of the other DIs. So that's about as cheap as you can go. So DIs for guitars and basses, and microphones for everything else. And one of those XR18s if you need, 16 channels. If you need more than that, there's other solutions, but chances are 16 channels will do you as pretty good. Why does professional digital audio equipment sample as high as 192 kilohertz when the Nyquist frequency for human hearing is only about 40 kilohertz? Well, to be honest, for the most part, I'm going to say that the answer is religion. People believe that magical devices made in the 50s could record up to 200, 500 kilohertz, whatever, and they believe that people hear that, and that makes a big difference to them. But in reality, the difference for recording, you can have a smoother anti-aliasing filter the higher the sampling rate you go. With 44K, let's say, if you want to band limit it to 20 kilohertz, which is human hearing for a really good human, at 44K, that only gives you 22 kilohertz sampling rate, or that 22 kilohertz is the highest frequency you can go. So that means you only have about a 2 kilohertz space to have an anti-aliasing filter, and that's pretty steep. Steep filters do funny things. If you had, like Dan Lavery was suggesting, 60 kilohertz sampling, which would give you a whole lot of space to add a long anti-aliasing filter. And then the other thing that people talk about a lot is processing. So if you're doing a lot of nonlinear processing, like a compressor, people see they can hear this in compressors all the time. I don't really hear it, but any nonlinear effect could make some aliasing trouble. And so you would want to be in a higher sample rate for those types of devices. But most plugins will allow you to oversample on the plugin itself. So I don't think recording it isn't the issue. It'd be just whether or not your plugin can handle it. And like I say, most of what you're going to see on this topic is just religion. A long time ago, I think on the music player forums, they had I think Nika Aldrich was working for Sweetwater at the time, and he had a really long thread on digital audio. So you can go take a look at that one. I'm not sure if you can even find that anymore, but it should be up. I think it was called George Watch This 96 kilohertz. And again, it's by Nika Aldrich, Nika. You should be able to find that, or at least you should be able to find an archive of it. And that's a lot of good reading on there. There's a lot of comparisons between digital audio and cameras and, video resolution and stuff, and just how different those two subjects are. And so that'd be a good place to go take a look. Okay, so I'm moving on to, does less gain distortion on a guitar amp mean a lower volume? Not if it has a master volume. So, but back in the old days, the only way you could get gain and distortion was to just keep turning up the volume knob. They didn't have a master volume, and so you'd have to crank that until you ran out of headroom, and then you'd get your distortion. But today, with the modern amp, you would just the master volume is going to decide what the actual volume is, while the gain knob is going to just determine how much distortion that thing has. So those two are decoupled in the modern world, thankfully. But, you still might run across some older amps and stuff where they are the same thing. And there are other gain effects that do depend on volume, so like feedback and things like that. But that's about it for that one. Typing in chat. I'm not seeing it, so I'm not sure why. I guess maybe I should check the YouTube. Check the stream real quick. I just want to make sure that there's not somebody that the chat relay thing is actually working. So actually, I'm pretty happy so far. And when you actually pay for this restream, the guys get on there and help you with the chat. They're asking you if you're doing okay right away, which I was pretty thrilled about, actually. But okay, so I'm not seeing anything on the YouTube chat either. So I guess you guys just aren't chatty tonight. I know I'm doing this way later than I normally do, but I really didn't have a chance tonight. So let me, okay. Oh boy. So this one, again, this is going to be a big fight. What are the pros and cons of using a standalone mic preamp versus a preamp incorporated into an audio interface? Again, if you go to pipelineaudio.net and you look at my real world gear testing, and you can compare these really expensive standalone mic preamps versus what's on your interface, you're going to see that for the most part, or actually in this case, in the case of most of the standalone ones that we tested so far, the audio interfaces cheapies do better than the $5,000 or more mic preamps that I've tested. So the pros, so most of the time the answer to this question, again, just like the other one, is going to be religion. It's not going to be anything based on facts. You're going to see all kinds of forum posts about people who believe that they hear these magical differences, and that is the difference between a hit and a dud is these super expensive mic preamps. But when you actually go and test these things, that's not going to be the case. But here's the pros. If your customers judge you by your gear rather than what's coming out of your speakers, you better have some nice mic preamps. If you're dealing with rappers, a lot of times you're going to want to have some kind of Avalon 737. They know what that looks like, and they expect to see it. That's actually, I'll show you when I get to testing them. But in general, there's no real, I mean, the pros are allegedly there's different characters on these things, and spoiler alert, there's really not. The cons, you're paying a whole lot of money for nothing. I mean, I'm going to be honest here. And remember, a lot of why I do this is my penance, because I used to believe that these things were all so different, and I used to tell people they had to go and spend all this money on these things that didn't make any difference, and I'm sorry for it, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I would just use the ones on your interface unless you're having problems with it, honestly. If you go ahead and look on my page and look at the tests, I think those results speak for themselves, and I know that's counter to everybody's religion, but sorry. That's just how it is. So let's see. Let's go to the next one here. Why some of these questions come to me? They don't necessarily. Anyway, where can I find free voice auto-tune software? I don't know if there's any graphical ones, but the automatic ones, G-Snap. G-Snap is free. Go grab it. I think there's a donate button, and the guy does some really good work. So if you really like it, please do donate to him. But it's just called GVST, G-Snap. And that one works great if you're looking for the auto stuff. You can even do all that crazy T-Pain stuff with it if you want. Okay, and this one's going to be short tonight, but I'm testing the new software and everything. And again, Jim Roseberry, where are you? So this is going to be the last one for tonight, unless I get some chats. How do you convert balanced audio to RCA phono audio? Is a mixer needed? A mixer's not needed, but that's one way you could convert it. What I would do is just get a solderable RCA jack and a solderable XLR jack, and tie on the XLR jack. Send pins send pins 1 and 3 to the ground of the RCA jack, and send pin 2 to the tip of the RCA jack. And it's not necessarily ideal, but that will get you there. You might have too much audio. It really depends on what your source is that's coming out. But that's how you do it. And yeah, I guess nobody's. I'm sorry I started this so late tonight, so I guess nobody's on the chat. But next week I will have this earlier in the morning, or I'll try and have a guest on next week. So we'll see how this goes. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, and